This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to CGTN. This is the world today. I'm Beatrice Marshall in Nairobi. Here are your top stories. A magnitude 6.5 earthquake strikes Yilan County in Taiwan. A major fallout expected after Turkey declares ambassadors of its Western allies unwanted in the country. And we tell you why Afghans wishing to travel out of the country now have an easier time. And we begin in Taiwan, where the China Earthquake Network Center has reported a magnitude 6.5 earthquake in Yilan County in Taiwan. It had a depth of 66.8 kilometers and could be felt across the north, east and west of the island, with the epicenter in Yilan County. Authorities say nuclear plants were affected by the quake and electricity, water and gas supplies are operating normally. Andy Lee spoke to us earlier from Taipei.
This earthquake on the island of Taiwan happened at 11 minutes past 1 p.m. It measured 6.3 on the Richter scale. And shortly after that, in less than 2 minutes, an aftershock, almost to the same scale, however a little bit less, was also felt. Now, the people on the island of Taiwan are still very scared, and I may say still in shock after this earthquake. Shopkeepers are cleaning up the shop because many items from shelves fell down. Now, as far as transportations are concerned, the mass rapid transit in Taipei City is at a standstill for checking, for safety concerns. Also, the high-speed rail of Taiwan on the island of Taiwan is also at a standstill right now for checking, for safety concerns. And if resumed afterwards, the length between the trains will be much longer, also for safety concerns. Now, as far as people are concerned, many of the people during the earthquake, including me, were very scared. It was shaking up and down, left and right, and immediately we turned off our gas because we're afraid the gas pipeline might rupture, and we are afraid to take the elevator. So people are still very scared right now.
And let's turn to Turkey, where a looming political crisis is brewing after President Erdogan said nearly a dozen ambassadors of its Western allies were unwelcome in the country. This comes after a joint statement by foreign embassies calling for the release of activist Osman Kavala. Michal Badavid has more details from Istanbul.
Erdogan's request to expel 10 ambassadors comes following a joint statement that these embassies released on Monday. In that statement, the diplomats had asked Turkey to release the philanthropist and businessman Osman Kavala. Now, Osman Kavala has been in jail for 4 years. He was first jailed on charges of financing the nationwide protests that took place in 2013, known as the Gezi protests. He was acquitted of these charges last year, but then that ruling was overturned this year and combined with new charges, this time in accusations with relations to the 2016 coup attempt accused of trying to overthrow the government. Now, the ambassadors had called for a just and speedy resolution to the Osman Kavala case. The European Court of Human Rights has called for Kavala's immediate release in late 2019, claiming that his arrest was based on political motives and lacking of evidence. However, some critics also believe that Erdogan's statement is actually aimed at a domestic audience as it comes a year and a half before elections. Well, currently, it's really not clear what the foreign ministry will do, whether it will implement Erdogan's order, basically. A cabinet meeting is expected to take place tomorrow, so we might receive a decision following that meeting. If it is implemented, that Turkey would basically be triggering a major political crisis with its Western allies, with 10 of them, and 6 of these are EU members. Turkey could also face the same procedures from these countries based on the principle of reciprocity. On Saturday, the European Parliament President tweeted, and I quote, "The expulsion of 10 ambassadors is a sign of authoritarian drift of the Turkish government. We will not be intimidated. Freedom for Osman Kavala." So that's one stance from Europe, at least. The Council of Europe had also earlier stated it will begin infringement proceedings against Turkey if Kavala is not released. The next hearing of Osman Kavala is going to take place on November 26. Meanwhile, Turkey's economy may also take another hit due to this potential political crisis. It's already suffering at the moment, but we may see the Turkish lira taking another hit on Monday.
Well, let's get more on this now. I'm joined by Sami Hamdi. He's the Managing Director of the International Interest, a global risk and intelligence company. He's joining us via Skype. Sami, thank you for joining us on the program. What do you make of this diplomatic dispute between Turkey and ambassadors of its Western allies?
I think it's the latest chapter of tensions between Turkey and the EU. It's important to remember that this is the latest chapter in 10 years of cascading relations between Turkey and the EU. Erdogan specifically believes that his concerns and grievances in the region are not being taken seriously by the EU, that the EU has not been cooperative, while the EU accuses Turkey and Erdogan of sliding back into regression on human rights and the like. So what we're seeing here is that as Erdogan approaches elections, as it looks like his chances are not as good as they were before, we're seeing this increasing tension in that there is a sense in Ankara that the EU wants to see Erdogan lose. You'll remember that Biden, the US president, during his election campaign said quite bluntly to New York Times journalists that we have to work with the opposition to defeat Erdogan, he said. So the animosity was clear from early days, and that's why we're seeing this lashing out from Erdogan over this statement that was made demanding the release of Osman Kavala. But it's also important to note that yesterday the Norwegian embassy released a statement saying that it had not been asked by the foreign minister to leave or to evacuate or to essentially have its ambassador dispelled. And this is what leads many people to suggest that perhaps Erdogan is bluffing and that rather he's trying to make a strong statement to say to the EU back off, to win internal support, to suggest that he's continuing to fight external threats, and indeed to try to force the EU to listen to him better, given that in the past 10 years he's come to realize that the EU only listens when he threatens and when he uses force, and not when he tries to engage in dialogue.
All right. So what should we expect, though, to happen next, if that is indeed the case, and if Turkey goes ahead and expels the diplomats from Western countries?
I don't think Erdogan wants to dispel the diplomats. I think they are trying to apply pressure on the EU on numerous issues. There are a number of issues that have essentially grinded to a halt as the EU waits to see what happens in the elections. I don't think there will necessarily be an escalation. It's true that we saw the chairman of the Munich Security Forum and former German ambassador yesterday state that the EU should also threaten to kick out Turkish embassies. However, it's also important to note that Merkel has always been the one who holds the stick from the middle, always been the one that facilitates dialogue. There is an appreciation that Turkey is under significant pressure, both economically and politically. There is an awareness amongst the more level-headed European policymakers that the cooperation with Turkey is needed. And therefore, what I envisage is that this will escalate diplomatically in terms of rhetoric, but not necessarily in terms of cutting diplomatic ties. I don't think Turkey can afford that. I don't think the EU can afford that. And I think what is happening today is behind-the-scenes negotiations and discussion to try to diffuse tensions and try to restore some sense of normalcy. But the reality is that the dynamics will stay the same, and the EU and the US are privately hoping that Erdogan loses the next election. Erdogan knows this, and I do think this is not the last time that we'll see escalation between the two in the near and in the short-term future.
All right, Sami Hadi joining us there via Skype. Thank you. The U.S. envoy for the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Sung Kim, just held in-depth talks with Seoul's Peninsula Peace and Security Representative No Kyu-duk. Jack Barton has more.
The talks wrapped up around 10 a.m. this morning between the two nuclear envoys, Sung Kim for the United States and No Kyu-duk for South Korea, both giving statements after that meeting and saying there had been productive discussions, that talks would be ongoing, but the two key areas where it seems the most progress had been was on the formal end-of-war declaration. So multiple parties involved in that conflict, so theoretically it would also have to have China on board as well as the DPRK, the US and South Korea. He said they also discussed humanitarian assistance that could reach ordinary citizens of the DPRK, and they were also exploring other options to restart the long-stalled nuclear diplomacy on the Korean Peninsula. However, the US envoy Sung Kim also had some tough words talking about the recent missile tests from the DPRK, describing them as in breach of multiple UN sanctions. He also said they were concerning, counterproductive and provocative, the kind of language that South Korea has been trying to avoid to sort of foster the restart of diplomacy. Nonetheless, Sung Kim saying he hoped that Pyongyang would respond positively to the US efforts to restart diplomatic talks aimed at a sort of a breakthrough that might ultimately lead to lasting peace.
The new Afghan government resumed issuing passports early this month. The process was suspended after the Taliban took over, making it almost impossible for many Afghans to leave the country. Abdul Hadi Derez has more from Kabul.
Like all other government agencies, Afghanistan's passport directorate shut down when the Taliban regained control. But with the formation of a new government, services resumed on October 5. Now operations are running smoothly. The new passports are physically identical with the ones issued during the previous government and are issued under the name of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. Foreign nationals can also apply for visas to enter the country.
The process has been very organized. There are no crowds anymore. These passports say Islamic Republic of Afghanistan on the cover. Several people have traveled abroad with the passports we issued. They didn't have any problem.
The passport office was notorious for red tape and briberies in the past. This made it difficult for people with no money to get passports. Today, passport issuance is much faster. Current applicants are happy with the changes.
During the previous regime, agents used to stand in front of the office, asking for money to process your passport. Today, I didn't see any such thing, and I hope I will get my passport easily.
Yes, I got our passports within 3 days. One passport is for a patient needing treatment abroad and the other for the caregiver. I'm very happy with the behavior of the personnel.
Most of the employees from the previous administration are now back in their posts and more passports are being issued. There are female employees in charge of processing applications for female applicants.
Today, we issued 4,700 passports. I have decided to increase the number to 5,000 to 6,000 passports a day. None of the equipment and machinery, including the biometric machine, computers and the data system, were damaged during the regime change.
The Director General says the resumption of the passport service is now generating a steady flow of much-needed revenue for the government.
Over 180,000 online applications have been received and 24,000 passports will be soon issued. Passports of those who applied during the previous government will be processed so they don't need to apply again. Taliban say they will issue passport to everyone who applies, but some groups, including those seeking medical treatment abroad and people wanting to study abroad, will be prioritized. Abdul Hadi Daris, CGTN, Kabul.
And that's it for this edition of The World Today. I'll be back shortly with more news from the continent in Africa Live. Thank you for watching.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni says blast in the outskirts of the capital, Kampala, was a terrorist attack. The challenges and achievements as the anniversary of the UN Charter's ratification in 1945 is marked. And scientists in South Africa seek to reverse engineer a COVID-19 vaccine to boost access to poor countries. Welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. Also ahead on the program, we celebrate Africa fashion in a premier event in Ethiopia. And Kenyan distance runner Tirop laid to rest as yet another top athlete killed, this time in Ecuador. Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni says the bomb blast that took place in the outskirts of the capital, Kampala, was a terrorist attack. Ugandan police have confirmed one person died and 5 people were injured in that bomb blast on Saturday night. The blast happened at a pub in Quarter Zone, Kamamboga, in the outskirts of the capital, Kampala. Isabel Nakiria reports.
Ugandan police say 3 people allegedly abandoned a polythene bag at a fully packed pub, which later exploded. So far, police says 1 person died, but 5 others were seriously injured and are receiving treatment in hospitals around Kampala.
We took cover after the blast. Some people suspected it was a car tire blast, but I was sure it was a bomb because I saw fragments.
When I was trying to enter my car and take off, the injured people were put in my car, but 1 person died.
President Museveni has tweeted saying it was a terrorist attack and he's ready to defend the country. The president also warned that he would defeat criminals and called for calm. The police has cordoned off the blast scene and are investigating the possible intention of the attack. No group has come out yet to claim responsibility for the attack. The last major terrorist attack in Kampala took place over a decade ago, killing over 50 people. The terror group Al-Shabaab claimed responsibility. In Uganda, pubs and nightclubs are still closed due to COVID-19 restrictions, but some bars still operate illegally. Curfew hours are in force, but many businesses operate beyond 7 p.m. local time. The blast comes days after the UK put an alert warning of a possible bomb explosion in Kampala's busy malls. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Authorities in Nigeria are stepping up efforts to recapture prisoners who are aided to escape after an attack by gunmen. The gunmen attacked a jail in Nigeria's Oyo State late on Friday. Prison officials say the attackers gained entry to the prison yard by blasting the walls with dynamite. After an exchange of gunfire with prison officers, they freed over 800 inmates by force. At least 260 of those prisoners have been recaptured, but 575 are still missing. Joining me now to unpack this from Dakar is Wote Ojewale. He's the Regional Organized Crime Observatory Coordinator for Central Africa at the Institute for Security Studies. Thank you for joining us on Africa Live. What is making prison facilities in Nigeria so prone to attacks?
Thank you so much for having me. The jailbreaks in Nigeria cannot be divorced from the existential crisis of insecurity in the country. And that informs the reason why it appears it has become a recurring decimal. So, one, you realize that, you have to consider the sophistication of the criminals that are carrying out these activities. You just mentioned now, and it's also available in the report, that they came with sophisticated military equipment. So it becomes very difficult for the little security that you have around the prison to be able to repel such attack. And the second thing is the overcrowded nature of the Nigerian prison. As I speak to you, about 70,000 inmates are in Nigerian prison. And it will be interesting to know that it is only 27% of this figure that has actually been convicted. So you have a situation whereby the security is stretched lean already, and you now have to police or secure a prison facility that is already overcrowded. So that is a major challenge. It will have been better if the prisons are less crowded. And the third point is the general failure of intelligence. Because before such level of attack is going to be carried out, it will be expected that the intelligence community should be able to pick that and act proactively.
So 575 of the inmates are still missing. What is going to be done to recapture the escapees and make jails in Nigeria more secure?
Well, I think the number one thing is the fact that it's important that that we take serious in Nigeria the issue of identity, which Nigeria has not really taken serious in the recent time, because these people have already mingled with the population and it becomes difficult to track them. So I think what is important is that the intelligence community, the police and other law enforcement institutions now need to increase their surveillance and actually be seen to be doing the work so that it doesn't go on the carpet like the previous jailbreak that we have had in Nigeria. 1 week after, you don't hear anything about such incident. I mean the tracking of those inmates again. So I think it's important that the security institutions and law enforcement are seen to be diligent in doing this. And I think the second option that is also very important is that the congestion of the military, of the prison facility needs to be seen to be taken beyond rhetorics. And the Ministry of Interior and the relevant government agencies are seen to be doing the needful so that the prison inmates the number can be reduced. And then in terms of securing those facilities, they can actually concentrate on what really matters, rather than lumping everybody together, whereby you have about 70% of the people who are actually awaiting trials. That is also very, very important. And generally improving on the security atmosphere within the country is going to help in this regard.
Wole Ojewale joining us there from Dakar. Thank you. Well, let's now turn to Mali, where a UN delegation is currently on the ground. The 15-member delegation is set to pressure the transitional government to abide by a February 27th deadline to hold a presidential election. ECOWAS set this deadline, but Malian authorities have openly suggested it might be missed. Colonel Assimi Goïta, who led the August coup, is the current interim president. The delegation will also discuss allegations that government security forces carried out summary executions as well as other human rights abuses. France's ambassador to the UN is part of the delegation. In addition to government officials, the UN delegation will also talk to the civil society stakeholders.
How can we help the United Nations to help Mali? How can we make sure that MINUSMA can be strengthened and work? This is the challenge. We come up with an attitude of openness and listening, and we hope to have an in-depth dialogue with the Malian authorities and with civil societies on Saturday evening and tomorrow.
We welcome this mission with open arms. We found this an opportunity to present the reality of the situation in Mali and also to present the progress that is being made by the transitional government, but also to present our vision of what must be done to complete this transition through the organization of transparent and credible elections.
Sunday marks the 76th United Nations Day, the anniversary of the UN Charter's ratification in 1945. The anniversary is celebrated on October 24th every year. A concert has been held at the UN headquarters in New York with pre-recorded performances. The UN Charter was initially signed at the San Francisco conference on June the 26th, 1945. This year also marks 50 years since China regained its seat in the United Nations. Here's a look at how it got there.
China is a founding member and one of the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council. But after the People's Republic of China was founded in 1949, it was kept out of the organization for more than 2 decades. In 1949, Beijing stated that the government of the People's Republic of China was the sole legal one of the country, calling for the expulsion of Taiwan regime from the UN. However, the demand was met with opposition, mainly from the United States. Influenced by Washington, the UN Assembly repeatedly voted down related resolutions. But the US influence was greatly cut down by China's efforts and the support from more and more newly independent countries in Asia and Africa. After the Asian-African Conference in 1955, ties between China and Africa were greatly strengthened. By 1965, 19 African countries had established official relations with China. Africa's vote was vital for China's return to the United Nations. In 1961, the 16th UN General Assembly decided to put China's representation on its agenda. It was a breakthrough for China's efforts, but the US didn't give up its plan to keep China out. Washington proposed the issue as an important question that could only be decided by a 2/3 majority vote of the General Assembly. For nearly a decade more, China struggled to restore its seat in the United Nations. In 1970, for the first time, the number of yes votes exceeded the no. Finally, on October 25, 1971, the 26th UN General Assembly rejected the United States' Important Question Resolution and passed the Resolution 2758, which restored all the lawful rights of the People's Republic of China in the United Nations and immediately expelled the Taiwan regime.
Voting is as follows: in favor 76, opposed 35, abstention 17. The draft resolution adopted. The government of People's Republic of China will be notified accordingly.
The resolution recognized the People's Republic of China as the only legitimate representative of China at the United Nations. The major breakthrough in diplomacy brought the country into a new era of multilateral relations. In the 1970s, China joined many UN-affiliated organizations such as UNESCO and ECOSOC. Since then, China has found its feet on the international arena with an entirely new look, as well as the determination to be more connected with the world. Wang Haiyang, CGTN.
Now, over the past 3 decades, China has contributed more than 40,000 peacekeepers to over 25 UN peacekeeping missions in Africa. Chinese peacekeepers have made a positive contribution to peace and development. CGTN's Robert Nagila takes a look at Chinese peacekeepers currently serving on the continent.
In 2020, China released its first ever white paper looking back at 30 years of involvement in United Nations peacekeeping operations. In it, China commits to the basic principles of UN peacekeeping, impartiality, and fulfilling the mandate of the UN Security Council. By the end of August this year, China had a total of 2,249 peacekeepers serving in 9 UN peacekeeping missions across the world. In Africa, there are 1,820 Chinese peacekeepers under 6 UN peacekeeping missions. The largest Chinese contingent on the continent is in South Sudan, under the United Nations Mission in South Sudan, or UNMISS, with 1,064 Chinese peacekeepers. In Mali, China has deployed 426 Chinese peacekeepers under the United Nations Multidimensional Integrated Stabilization Mission, known as MINUSMA, and a further 232 Chinese peacekeepers serve under the United Nations Organization Stabilization Mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo, known as MONUSCO, while in the disputed region of RBA, between Sudan and South Sudan, there are 86 Chinese peacekeepers under UNISFA, or the United Nations Interim Security Force for RBA. 11 Chinese experts serve under MINURSO, the United Nations Mission for Referendum in Western Sahara, and 1 police officer in Sudan under UNITERMS, the United Nations Integrated Assurance Mission in Sudan.
You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. Scientists in South Africa seek to reverse engineer a COVID-19 vaccine to boost access to poor countries. And we celebrate African fashion in a premier event in Ethiopia.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, It matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
In South Africa, young scientists are reverse engineering a coronavirus vaccine. The scientists hope their end product will reach the world's poorest people. Only 0.7% of COVID-19 vaccines have gone to low-income countries so far, while nearly half have gone to wealthy countries. Nokutula Shabalala has more.
These warehouses in Cape Town have been converted into a maze of airlocked, sterile rooms. Young scientists are assembling and calibrating the equipment needed to reverse engineer a coronavirus vaccine. Their mission is to narrow vaccine inequality globally.
Africa is maybe not as developed as a lot of the other countries who can afford to transport millions of vaccine vials at -20 or -70 degrees. That is not something that is feasible for a lot of countries in Africa. So we have to make sure that we innovate so that we can get this vaccine to as many of the African citizens as we can.
The scientists are working to replicate Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine, and they are doing it with the backing of the World Health Organization. The WHO is coordinating vaccine research, training and production in South Africa.
We've chosen the Moderna as the gold standard because it comes out of preclinical data where the various vaccines were compared head to head. And that data is showing that Moderna is actually more favorable at this stage. Also, the Moderna vaccine is cold storage is less difficult at -20 degrees. So those are two of the reasons why we decided to do that.
Many countries, including the US, have pledged to provide vaccines to poorer nations.
What I'm saying right now to the White House is we need to be practical. You've pledged 1.1 billion doses to the rest of the world, and that's good, but roughly 10 to 20% of that has only been delivered so far. But we need to actually do much more than 1 billion doses, and we need Moderna to participate in that effort. And so, we've got to hustle because if we don't, we're going to end up with another catastrophe on our hands. We can't go to lockdowns anymore. People are sick and tired of that. We got to keep the schools open. We got to keep the economy open. And that means we got to get people vaccinated around the world.
Some experts see reverse engineering, which is recreating vaccines from fragments of publicly available information, as one of the last ways to readdress the power imbalances of the coronavirus pandemic, which will give many people a fighting chance against COVID-19. Nokutula Shabalala, CGTN.
Millions of people across Kenya are suffering due to drought caused by 2 back-to-back seasons of poor rainfall, resulting in severe food shortages. This has resulted in malnutrition in many communities, especially among lactating mothers and children. CGTN's Nick Mudimba reports from Kenya's Garissa County.
Ziwani village in Kenya's Garissa County. A typical day in the settlement starts, but it's business unusual for many. Adija Ibrahim, a mother of 6, is getting ready to prepare a meal for her family. The children are not sure whether they'll get all their meals of the day. On this day, they'll only have one meal. As Adija prepares the meal, the elderly are tasked with collecting firewood.
We go to casual jobs, but at times 2 days passes without any work. The kids feed inconsistently. Mostly it's 1 meal a day or sometimes nothing. Some days they go even without water. Diarrhea is now another problem, and malaria is also there.
Most of the women here are involved in small businesses of selling vegetables. They are, however, forced to use up their stock to feed their families. The drought has hit the local community hard and malnutrition is prevalent. The COVID-19 pandemic has worsened the situation.
As mothers, we are the most affected. We don't have food. At times, when the kid is sick, the only thing the doctor says is feed the child. That's the only treatment.
Such phases of despair sum it all. There is no guarantee of what's next and no idea when this drought will come to an end.
The COVID-19 pandemic may add between 83 and 132 million people to a total number of undernourished in the world in 2020, depending, of course, on the decrease of growth of GDP scenarios that we use. What this means is that the situation and any progress that was made, for example, in poverty reduction in the last 10 years, have been reduced. And moreover, in the case of undernourishment, which has been increasing in the last years, the situation will get worse in a significant amount more of hungry people, which means that it will be even more difficult to be able to achieve SDG 2.
According to the World Food Programme, as of June 2021, 26.2% of children under 5 years suffered from chronic malnutrition in Kenya. During the same period, 4.2% of children were affected by acute malnutrition. 465,000 children and 96,000 pregnant and lactating women are acutely malnourished. The number of undernourished people in sub-Saharan Africa has been rising steadily. That's according to the World Health Organization. And the situation here in northern Kenya isn't making things better. The drought is biting. Many of them are living hand to mouth, not knowing what tomorrow holds. Nick Mudimba, CGTN, Garissa County, Kenya.
A Ugandan artist is finding success using somewhat unusual materials. Michael Sozi turns beads into beautiful pieces of art. And as CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga tells us, it's also helping homeowners to give their living rooms a new look.
Michael Sozi creates a mosaic art pattern. With much care, he sticks the beads on the board. His art pieces depict nature and African culture.
If you look at the drums, we try to portray that culture of the Baganda. So basically, we try to promote us and us as a country and our cultures.
The beads come in lots of different colors, which allows the artist to be extremely creative, but it's not the easiest material to work with. Sozi says it takes about 2 weeks to complete an art piece like this one, and because of the much time invested in his work, he's able to get good returns. An art piece here costs between $600 to $1,500. Art lovers say the art pieces are unique.
I feel the originality in his works, the way he plays with the beads onto the board. It's so original, and I love the patience he gives. Like, you feel the time in his work and how he plays with the colorful beads to come up with different artworks, stories. Yeah, it's really powerful.
Sozi's customers include homeowners, hotels and tourists. But like any other business, Sozi's source of income was also hit by the COVID-19 pandemic.
Now you see the situation we are in of the coronavirus. So there are not very many customers. Yeah, so we also find that challenge of market.
And to keep in business during the pandemic, Sozi is adding a new material on top of beads, glasswork. With these two art forms, Sozi hopes to bring more beauty into people's living rooms, but also cash in from his talent. Hilary Ayesiga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. Zimbabwe saves $300 million in its import bill following a bumper harvest.
Restoration of China's seat in the United Nations was an epic diplomatic battle. A journey fraught with obstacles.
Yes!
Africa's support was crucial. Victory saw a new era in China-Africa ties, founded on a common future and shared prosperity.
Now, after a series of successive droughts that affected food security in the past few years, Zimbabwe's fortunes are turning around. The country has recorded a good harvest in the 2020-2021 season. This has helped slash Zimbabwe's import bill by $300 million, as many millers are now able to meet local demand. Nokutula Shabalala has more.
Zimbabwe's maize reserves are advancing towards a projected 2.8 million tons following a good harvest. Millers of maize and other grains who once felt the pinch of failing to meet local demand due to droughts are now getting back on their feet.
We can plan beyond 12 months. Previously, we used to have one to 2 months cover. And that has been very difficult in terms of planning, in terms of committing to customers and ensuring that the market is well provided for. But also, equally, in terms of labor, we were unable to guarantee tenure or employment beyond the cover that we had.
More grain deliveries are being recorded across the country compared to previous farming seasons. But Zimbabwe's Grain Marketing Board says farmers need to be financially and technically supported to contribute to the nation food basket.
Next year, we are expecting, all things being equal, 3.6 million metric tons of maize, according to our projections. And also to ensure that we get funding on time and pay our farmers on time, makes the farmers happy and they deliver to GMB. Give them a good price, farmers are ready to grow and improve on production.
The millers have felt the impact of climate change, and with the help from government, they need to adopt climate-smart agriculture for a greater grain yield.
We are not spared as Zimbabwe by this scourge of climate change effects and variability. So we need to adapt lest we die, hence our thrust and ploy to climate-proof agriculture through irrigation, rehabilitation and development.
To support the commercial grain farmers, government has targeted 1.5 million households this year. They are expected to plant 280,000 hectares of maize under a conservation agriculture scheme. Nokutula Shabalala, CGTN.
And still in Zimbabwe, players in the real estate sector are reconfiguring their traditional operating models in order to meet demands of changing clients' profiles.
COVID-19 restrictions that kept workers at home and closed shops and offices dented property values as owners tried to accommodate tenants whose cash flows were disrupted.
When you have low demand of space, it means to retain occupancies, you may have to reduce your rentals. So the reduction in rentals versus aesthetic cost of development, what it really means is your property values are now, they've gone down.
The residential market was not affected as much because players developed new models, including leasing out serviced stands as opposed to selling them outright.
Let's say buying a house, stand and a home is 100%. 40% of that value is usually going towards the purchase of the land. Now we are telling you, don't buy the land, lease the land, build your dream home, come and live in a dream home and continue paying rental towards that stand.
Even before the COVID-19 pandemic, Harare Central Business District was experiencing a drop in occupancy as many formal businesses fled congestion and some closed down.
All 5 floors of this building used to be occupied by an upmarket department store. It has since been replaced by hundreds of informal traders.
Such businesses are crucial for the survival of property owners who have millions of dollars in capital tied in these high-rise buildings.
Those little 10, 20 square meter, even a cubicle where somebody can bring their cell phones or their chargers or what have you, and if that's what they're selling, that's what they're selling. And you've got to meet the market where it is. Real estate is ever dynamic and must meet the needs of those people who are there versus those who used to be there or those who might come.
Some long-held practices may have to be revisited.
The traditional mentality of looking at leasing is to have a 10-year, 15-year, 20-year lease agreement. But with this kind of briefcase business, people They want flexibility. They want to come and list for one day.
It's estimated that more than 80% of Zimbabwe's labor force is engaged in informal economic activities. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa, has hosted the Africa Fashion Reception, a fashion gala that brings together designers from all over the continent annually to showcase their work. The event could not take place in 2020 because of the COVID-19 pandemic and has resumed this year. Due to COVID-19 entry restrictions, it was not held at the compound of the African Union Commission, as has been the norm. CGTN's Coletta Wanjohi attended the event and now reports.
Work done by African designers thronged the runway in Addis Ababa. For some of them, it was an opportunity to showcase their work beyond home.
I'm all the way from South Africa, and the reason I decided to participate today is because I feel like this is a great platform to get my brand out there and for Africa to know about my brand.
The African fashion is becoming very much more important and very known due to tourism that we have because of over 200 cultures that we have in African countries, which is very unique, and that is why we'll be celebrating African fashion.
For many others, it was a chance to get back to the limelight after the COVID-19 pandemic.
It is about time that the African Union supports their own. Fashion is a business worth $3 trillion globally. We cannot expect to tap any of that without feeding the cow. We cannot milk a hungry cow. And so I'm very happy that the African Union is definitely now taking baby steps. I'm proudly associated tonight.
But not all designers made it to Addis Ababa.
The event has attracted about 15 fashion designers from different parts of the continent. The organizers say they had a target of double that number, but because of COVID-related complications, many others could not make it.
This includes travel restrictions. The Africa Fashion Reception began in 2013 in France, but 3 years later on, the organizers, with the support of the African Union, started having it in Addis Ababa at the AU Commission.
Africa Fashion Reception are 2 editions. The first one at the African Union in Addis Ababa, where we bring all the designers here, and we take them to Paris, which is the global edition. And when we're in Paris, everybody listens to us, everybody comes, everybody wants to see, everybody wants to wear our clothes.
But the fashion gurus are concerned that within Africa, African creativity is not getting the recognition it deserves.
Because they see it as entertainment. They don't see it as business. Do you understand? I mean, people come to fashion events and they look at it, all in their heads is models going on the runway. What are these people doing? And they forget we all wear clothes. They all wear clothes. And this is what markets the designers.
Some Africans, though, believe there is hope.
It's going further. It's forward. Yes. Fashion cannot end now. Fashion is all over, forever.
You can see a lot of people coming from other African, other part of the world to come patronize African fashion. There is a big change. There's a big change. In the next 10, 20 years, we'll take over the world.
This special season is an African season. It's our season, it's our time. We need to rise and shine.
According to the African Development Bank, the value of the African fashion industry is over $1.3 trillion and is on the rise. It says the industry remains slow in growth, partly because 90% of fashion businesses are small to medium scale. There is high cost to ship fabric and materials across the world, loss of intellectual property, and high cost of copyright. Many fashion entrepreneurs here say they hope the African Continental Free Trade Area, being implemented now by the African Union, will ease these hurdles and enable them walk towards a better and brighter future. Coletta Wanjohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Time now for a look at your sports news. Here's what's ahead. Kenyan distance runner Tirop laid to rest as yet another top athlete killed, this time in Ecuador.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? sports scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Slain long-distance Olympic runner Agnes Tirop, a rising star in Kenya's highly competitive athletics, has been buried at an emotional funeral attended by over 1,000 mourners on Saturday. CGTN Sadiq Shaban brings us more.
Agnes Chebet Tirop has been remembered and eulogized as a humble yet hard-working person by thousands of people who turned up for her funeral. In an emotional send-off ceremony at her rural home in Western Kenya on Saturday, speakers remember the fallen Olympian and world record holder, saying she did not deserve to die at such a young age.
Agnes was like my sister to me. We used to race, like several races, like 20 races so far. So what I can remember of Agnes during the Tokyo 2020 Olympics, I was telling Agnes that I'm going to move to road races, so you're going to take over from me. So, but unfortunately, we won't see Agnes anymore.
It's a bad moment to us, and Agnes Tirop is our champion. I remember many things to Agnes Tirop. First of all, I remember him when he won a record in Germany. I was the one who gave a flower after winning, after breaking record. It was so sad to me.
It's a very sad incident, and as athletes we are appealing that this is very sad, and we wanted to see action it is taken by the government of Kenya, so that at least the family and athletic fraternity also get justice for this case.
I remember Agnes in 2019 when we are in World Championship, because Agnes got a bronze medalist in 10,000 and I got a bronze medalist in marathon. So Agnes, we share a light moment with Agnes and after the race, because 10,000 was about almost the same day with the marathon, because Agnes was in, we are the same in management with Agnes. Chiani the marathon at the promotion, and we get the same medal, bronze in 10,000 and I got bronze in marathon. So on that time we really say, wow, you get a bronze and we are the same in family over the athletics. So it's really painful.
We have female coaches. I have about 110 women coaches that have attained the qualifying mark of a coach. So that cannot worry. But even if you have women coaches, and the athletes themselves cannot come up and say, it will be also a problem.
When it reaches such points like these ones, it's so sad. We've seen people taking their own lives, leave alone the kind of, the way Agnes was killed, but some people even are killing themselves because of mental issues. And, I think it's time now again for our federation maybe to come up with a, mental health department to speak to our athletes.
The 25-year-old was brutally murdered in cold blood 10 days ago, with her estranged husband in custody as a prime suspect in a tragic incident that has shocked the country and the entire sporting world. Athletes want more support from stakeholders and the community in dealing with matters related to mental health and depression in sport. Tirop won bronze medal in the 2019 World Athletics Championship in Doha, Qatar, and recently represented Kenya at the Tokyo Olympic Games. Before the long-distance running star was killed, she had just set a new world record in the women's 10 kilometers. She was interred on her birthday. Agnes Chebet Tirop, dead at 25.
Sadly, there was yet more tragic news out of the world of athletics as Ecuadorian sprinter Alex Quinones was killed in his home city of Guayaquil on Friday, according to the country's sports minister on Saturday. Quinones won bronze in the 200 meters of the 2019 World Championships in Doha and reached the final of the same event at the 2012 London Olympics. The El Universo newspaper reported that the 32-year-old Quinones and another individual were shot dead on Friday night. Ecuador's President Guillermo Lasso expressed his condolences and promised that the killing would not go unpunished. Quinones' death marks the second killing of an international athlete this month after Kenyan distance runner Agnes Tirop was found stabbed to death at her home. In the English Premier League, a Mason Mount hat-trick was the highlight as Chelsea thumped Norwich 7-0 at home to go to the